Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Dev Update. I am filling in as CW from Wish today. How you doing, Joe?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. It's good to have you.
I feel like I got a checklist, Joe, and I'm trying to fill in for be the CW from Wish, the Joe from Wish. I've been the Andy from Wish. Now I'm gotta be Dan and Kushti next, I guess, to get the 5-seater right there.
Yeah, but yeah, I'm just happy that you're willing to step up and make videos, to be honest. That's one thing that I don't know, in the Ergo ecosystem, it seems like there's a lot of camera shy
Yeah, it
people
does.
out there where it's like, hey, you guys want to make a video? And they're like, no.
They don't even
Right?
answer you. Yeah, 100%. All right, so I've been told the tradition is that we think of a topic and we chat a little bit about it.
Yeah.
So I think something pressing on everybody's mind is that there may be some confusion about, or maybe some clarity needed, are the two big things coming up, and that's Bitpanda and MEXC.
Yeah.
Let's start with Bitpanda. What the question that I always had is, I see in chats a little bit that that Bitpanda isn't necessarily the kind of CEX that you think it is.
Mhm.
So what sets Bitpanda apart from that typical, KuCoin or those other sexes?
Okay, so when you have an exchange, many times what you have this trade engine and order book, right? And so most exchanges will kind of have their own internal liquidity. And if you look at what Bitpanda does in a way, they have the ability to look at the order books of multiple exchange and pick their deal. Okay. So they're actually more of a broker where if you look at like the variety of assets that they offer to their users, it's beyond crypto even. And so they have this ability to kind of take orders and go to multiple markets and find basically the best price for their users. That's kind of their shtick, right? And one of the cool things that they do is they have bank rail support, so to where they support multiple currencies in multiple countries, and they're it's sometimes crypto exchanges are in the gray, right? And as a longtime supporter of something like Trade Ogre, I love that. I think it's great to be in the gray in this industry. Especially if you're ethical. That's a whole nother question. If you're gray in terms of markets and you're doing some sketchy shit, that's never good. But Bitpanda, does a good job at kind of being on the regulated side. So it will open up Europe. So European users will be able to take funds from their institution and use Bitpanda to interact with crypto markets. So in a way, they're somewhat similar to what Americans might be familiar with like Robinhood or something. Um, but I would say they're probably a better service. I think a lot of the times Robinhood is pretty much like prison in terms of
Mm.
self custody, right?
Come buy crypto from us, and maybe you
Yeah,
can be
you
on a
can't
waiting
really.
list,
You can
of
sell it.
5 million people to get a
Yeah,
wallet. Yeah.
you can sell it, but it'll never leave. Like you're just a hostage now.
Yeah, it's like Hotel California, right?
Yeah, so I believe they do a much better job than some of the crypto crossover like TradeFi things that you don't never see self custody, and um, I'm excited to see it. It will make the user experience for a lot of Europeans that want to move into and out of Erg a lot easier, and there's value in that.
Have you looked at the specifics of the operation inside as for the user? Is it similar to, like you said, Robinhood or a Sex, where you actually have your funds inside their protocol, their ledger? Or when you purchase through Bitpanda, does it go into a self-custody wallet at that point, or do you have a choice? Does it have to
I
stop?
to be totally honest, I'm sitting in the US. I've never used it, right? Um, I do know that someone like Glasgow is going to have a lot more insight because he can actually move in and out of it. So in terms of the user experience, I have no idea. But there's been a lot of European users that are saying, "Hey, this is really great. We would love to support this service." So here we are. We created this community fundraising effort that did pass, and So at this point on the back end, we're working with integration testing, making sure the infrastructure is good there, and I believe they will have the ability out of the gate to pull liquidity from Gate and from KuCoin. And so then as Erg grows, potentially could have other markets that they have this ability to say, okay, we want to get our users the best price, right? So then they'll pull from multiple books in order to do that.
In those circumstances, Joe, do they usually have you some of the requirements where they may have you host a node or Explorer instance for them specifically, so you have to run that for them, or is that included in their thing, or they just use somebody else's?
Well, you get into this idea of like a common backend, and there are a couple of let's say backends in the crypto space that are relatively popular and widely adopted. Fireblocks would be a good example of one, where that's something that we've been in line for, and sometimes when you're in line in crypto, is a purgatory type place.
A lot of cutters, I'm sure.
Yeah, it is what it is. So they have software that's integrated across exchanges, partners, and so they have access to multiple backends. So integration there is actually a little bit easier than it would be to actually stand up independent infrastructure, and that's a part of why the cost is lower. When you get into a large exchange, they have to build a custom node and then connect it to their database and trade engine and front end, and there's a lot more engineering there.
I got you. That makes sense. All right. What about MEXC? Now, I'd like to think that I pay attention sometimes to the chats, but this just the first time I heard about it is looking at the raffle, and I was like, wait, what the what the hell is this? And it's 47, thousand.
It's a big
Coming
raffle.
up. Yeah.
So yeah, that's a pretty solid exchange in terms of volume. Then in terms of let's say access, it tends to be somewhat similar to what KuCoin was, right? KuCoin, a lot of people love KuCoin because the KYC requirements were not so strict. You could move in and out pretty well. The order book had some depth, and you also had other interesting tools like grid bots and things like that, right? Well, they kind of enforced this KYC on the US users, and now that's kind of untethering them from this market. There's no other way to put it. I'm sure they'll retain some clientele, but if you're going to have to use KYC from the US, it probably makes a little bit more sense to use something in the US, right? So hopefully that gives our miners especially this ability to transact without KYC, and sure, traders as well. And then a lot of the times what happens is at some point, if somebody wants to move back into their market, they're going to have to move back to their exchange that they came into, probably if they came into the crypto space wiring money. So they'll move back to whatever their home exchange was or their first step, and be able to liquidate back to their native currency there if they want to. But I really think KYC exchanges are super valuable, especially when it comes to mining, right? That's something that, I don't know, it's kind of buried in the space. If you look at proof of work, it existed before exchanges, right? So it was like this ability to come in and help with the creation and distribution of money without needing any KYC. You just needed computer parts, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then, the industry kind of was born around, miners initially. The first exchanges were like, PayPal swaps and, kind of hacked things that people used to get in and out. It's become a lot more formalized, and, there's some benefits to that and there's some downsides to that, to be honest. I think that if you were really look back at like the initial proof of work community and the exchanges, it was much more peer-to-peer. But things, we're in a different world now in a lot of sense. So
do you see things like firms like Bitpanda being more prominent in the crypto space than these central exchanges in the future kind of things. Whereas, Bitpanda's got quite a bit less risk with
Mhm.
these kind of things as far as setting up an exchange like
Sure.
MEXC or KuCoin. There's a lot of
That's a
risk and
that's
legal
a
involved.
yeah, that's a good question. I would say that in a perfect world, in my opinion, you would have multiple actors that would have the ability to move in and out of decentralized exchanges and use the actual chain as liquidity, right? To where, even if you had some form of like, we have some like banked stable coins, but even then you have another intermediary involved. It'd be much more interesting to see if you could get uh, like more ecosystem level access, where you create a stable coin and you could move in and out. Then you kind of all an exchange is a wallet, right? That's all it is. It's a wallet. Now maybe there's a couple of signatures that are needed to do a lot with the wallet, but all it is a wallet and then a database. And the database says, okay, we have 1,000 users that's funds are represented in this one wallet. And we're going to continually keep track, and as funds move in and out, we're going to update that database. But all it is a wallet, right? Like there's a lot of magic in kind of people's perception about what an exchange is, but it's
Yeah.
literally a wallet and a database and a matching engine, basically. So I think that it certainly could be done better than it is. And if you were to look at what could that potentially do, I think it would create better end pricing for users, right? Because when everything's happening in one wallet, it can get a little sketchy.
Yeah, that's for sure. My goodness.
Yeah.
Wow, well, cool. That was some good insight, Joe. You want
Mhm.
to dig in?
Sure, let's get into it. I'll start with Louis Vatra.
He's got a big
Uh,
one this week.
yeah, looks like
I think he's
Paideia
working on too
Beta.
much stuff. Goodness.
Yeah, he's busy. With Paideia Beta, looks like that's going to be soon, as always. The insured showing of actions belonging to proposal in the proposal description. Looks like the proposal is set to draft until confirmed on chain. Further bug fixing going on. Full focus is here now. So looks like a couple of issues needed to be fixed before the public beta, but as we started, that's going to be soon.
Soon.
I, I'm looking forward to Paideia, to be totally honest with you.
Oh yeah, I'm looking forward to not having to manage my vote system for the Sigma anymore, and we can go to a, more of a DAO-based structure then.
Oh,
This is-
it's a pretty nice suite, you know. So with Crux, looks like they're working on the charts, token list, sorting, filtering. Portfolio endpoint is reaching the MVP, attaching value based on spectrum. It's like some meta tokens belonging to duck pools, ErgoPad spectrum. So it looks like we're going to get token pricing. And if you have any like staking keys and exotic things like that, it'll show up as a user-friendly portfolio, right? Looks like some front-end polishing remains before the public MVP. Doesn't cover all the features, which were part of phase one, but they felt the ones that were basically the most value, they were going to go live. Now with ErgoPad, staking off-chain bots now get the current list of stake boxes from the index node. Now that the Explorer grinded to a halt on this request, so set the Ergo Python app kit to the correct version. The latest version is broken for some functionality. And with the tip bot, spent time adding greasy NFTs to the supported token list. That's pretty cool to see a tip bot with NFTs.
It is really fun. That's I've tested out tips some few of the cards to people, but I think it's a good starter, and I think Louis Vatra, I spoke to him, can go even a little further than this, where you can just because the way they had it is one of the members of GreasyCEX, or one of the community members, had to literally put in every single token ID in the tip bot to make the tip bot familiar with it, so Louis can put it in there. But what will be cool in the future, hopefully, is that Louis can build his tip bot to do dynamic tokens. So you can essentially take an NFT, find the token ID, and you can say /T, then the token ID, and then
Oh, that would
or
be
one, and then
cool.
the token. Then you can
That
tip
would
any
be
token
cool.
you want to. Yeah,
Yeah,
dynamically.
I when the tip bot first came out, I was a little bit like, "Oof, this is going to be the spam bot, right?"
Yeah.
I had no
Yes, it
idea.
is. It still is,
It's
but it's
well,
great.
it kind of still is, but in like I don't know, you release something like that on Twitter, and you got a bunch of degens, and it's like, oof. Well, now we can attach art, so like the threat level just went up.
That's a good point. Oh, people tipping dick
Yeah,
NFTs.
yeah. I mean, there could be some applications there that we really got to be well. We can't really be careful of because it's open source code, right? But we
Yep.
could say, please behave yourselves.
Oh gosh. I'm looking forward to Crux too. That is when I first came into Ergo, that was one of the things I noticed was missing, is a way
Mhm.
just to have a portfolio. And I know ErgoPad kind of had your little dashboard, but there were some things lacking. So actually, I built a little site that would do that for you. Essentially, it'd read the chain of your wallet. No, it wouldn't even. You'd put it in manually, and then it'd read the prices from Spectrum and give you your totals and that kind of thing. I took that down maybe 6 months ago, but it's really nice to see something like Crux. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, in terms of building for end users, there's a huge space to occupy in terms of
Yeah.
taking a lot of the complexity and just burying it.
Yep.
You know, an example would be like if you had a visual block explorer that's like, here's the logo of the token, here's the number, right? Something so simple that, somebody not involved can, in crypto, that doesn't need to learn the block explorer or want to learn about, minor payments in UTXO and all of this other fun stuff, and just make it stupid simple. There's a huge use case for that.
I think there's isn't there a visual block explorer that somebody wrote for Cardano, I think?
I don't know.
It shows like the blocks dropping as they are mined, and
Yeah,
then
yeah.
you click on
I
it
think
and get
there's
into
something
it.
like that. It might be more on in terms of like how many transactions are on a block or
Yeah, yeah,
something.
yeah.
But
Well,
yeah, I mean, that type of visual tool is valuable.
Joe, I'm sure it's open source code. I'm sure we can just grab it and,
Yeah.
refactor it to Ergo. I'm sure it's open source.
Let's see. Let's see.
All right, what's next? Rosen Bridge, MHS Sam. Oh, that's funny. I'm doing this and you did the other one. Great. He's working on the landing page and contents, stress testing the final system, getting ready for guard set initialization, and waiting for Catalyst funding 10 voting. Please vote. So he's doing it as well as I think Paideia submitted a
Hmm.
Catalyst proposal for Cardano. And for those of you that are wondering why the hell are Ergo people submitting Cardano Catalyst funding, well, Padilla's cross-chain, and Rosen Bridge will
Hmm.
be going over to Cardano as well and benefiting that ecosystem. So it really is deserved
That's a tool.
of
It's a
applying.
tool
Yeah.
for them.
Yep. That's pretty cool. What there was a question in chat, Joe. Maybe those
Yeah.
people are listening earlier today about the guard set, and
Mhm.
it was about the functionality of the multi-sig and how the guards interact with it. And from my understanding of a multi-sig, when you create the multi-sig, it's hard coded with those private
Mhm.
keys
Mhm.
of the people involved. So if you have an
Yeah.
initial guard set of like 12 people, we'll say you've created the
Mhm.
multi-sig with those 12 people with a threshold that you're saying, 5 out of 12 need to be before it's signed. So how do you dynamically add to that as the guard set increases on version 2? When
Mhm.
Sam's ready to add in more guards, you have to create a new multi-sig, or is that not how the guards interact with the wallet?
Well, you have two different aspects here that we got to start, and if we're going to look at this, first is this idea of threshold signatures. Threshold signatures are more dynamic, right? Then you have the hard coded multi sig, right? And some changes that Rosen will interact with is going to be a hard coded multi sig, right? And in that case, you have to update the set and you have to update the watchers to the new wallet. So it is a pain in the ass, right?
Okay.
And so it's something that we've talked about, and it's more like, okay, well, if we add um, a new set of watchers, right? It makes a lot more sense to make it like a ceremony where we add multiple. instead of one at a time. You know what I'm saying? So let's say that we start with like light assumptions where it's not that distributed of a multi-sig, right? Well, if we update it, let's double the number, triple the number, and it's much easier to do that in one update than to make it dynamic where one user comes, one user leaves, and it would be a little crazy to try to chase that
So
potentially.
essentially, you could have like seasons of
Yeah,
this.
yeah. That's kind of how I envisioned it. When you run into that hard coded multi-sig, is we have a certain season or quarter or whatever you want to call it.
Like who's in, who's out this season. Let's redo it.
Exactly. And then when you reach that point, you update all of your watchers. Start watching that new wallet. But there's going to be a bit of work involved in
Does
that. So
sound complicated back there. Yeah.
yeah, even that's not so uh seamless, right? But in a way, maybe it's good these things are hard to change, uh, you know and then we get this idea of, okay, well, if we have the hot wallet, cold wallet, that's another layer of complexity and the update. So my hope is that as Rosen takes off, we get a distributed set of actors that are stable, so we don't have to play around with that too much. But then again, wishful thinking is wishful thinking, right?
Yeah.
So it's something that we do have to kind of look at and say, okay, well, I like the season idea. It's not fully dynamic, but at least it's predictable. And uh, you know, uh,
Will a cold wallet exist on every single chain for those assets, or just on the Ergo side?
well, it's potential on every chain, right? Because
What's a cold wallet hold? Does it hold like an excess of a certain percentage of what you think the in and out of the wallet's going to be, and you don't have
yeah.
support,
So
so you hold
we're
the
gonna
extra?
we're gonna actually kind of steal from exchange thinking here, because that's usually how exchanges deal with that type of
Security layer.
yeah, it's like a certain security layer. They have their cold wallet, and periodically it does happen where they're like, hey, the withdrawals on ETH are down, and it very well may be they're going to their cold wallet and re-upping some of their funds. you know and it's just a security thing, saying, okay, well, if we remove those, then they're not hot and our attack value is less.
Mm-hmm.
So it's something that they kind of figure out and manage as they scale.
Cool. I think we got Kushti for you next.
All right, so we're going protocol and reference client research and development. Looks like 5.0.14 has been released. Looks like a couple of PRs for 5.0.15 is set. Looks like the ETA is going to be 2 weeks. Let's see. Reviewed a couple of PR and Sigma. Continue writing on faster confirmations and brighter propagation. Also see below. So with Chain Cash, looks like reworking the contracts. He's been diving into that recently. Done some fixes, but the main goal is to have support for L2 with the same contract set, which would mean isomorphic execution, whether L1 or L2, kind of Hydra without federated co-signing states. Some more open and decentralized than what we're currently looking at with the Hydra setup. Which, those of you that don't know, Hydra at the end of the day is basically multi-sig. It's, isomorphic channel, but that's kind of the point at the end. So it's actually somewhat similar to Rosen in terms of its attack surface. With Dexy, looks like Code for Us is trying to get the Dexy LP working with off-chain bots. And with Holdcoin, looks like we've got some more DGen finance on the way from Bruno. Reviewed the final version of token contracts.
Maybe we'll have some comment hodl, huh?
It would be kind of funny to put on a meme coin and say, okay, like the
Yeah, that's like the fun
value
part
that's
of
lost
it.
is just
Yeah, who
massive. Like,
cares?
I don't know. Why not? I'm sure Comment would be up for it. Like the 60% fee or some crazy
No,
nonsense.
I think you mentioned, I was like, look, you should do it so that when you mint or when you burn Comet HODL, that it randomly takes a token or a coin from your wallet as
Oh
well.
god. Yeah, that could be terrible. That's a
That'd be
terrible idea.
epic.
That's a terrible idea.
And then the more tokens and different tokens and the amount of tokens you have in your wallet when you burn, you may get an even more bonus award. So it would give you incentive to have that risky large amount of tokens in your wallet when you burn.
Well, I will sideline that one and just have the popcorn.
Kushti, I saw in chat today, in Discord and 5015 for Node. Kushti's going to work on database repair on the nodes. So if some nodes get corrupt databases, the 15 will do an auto repair on it. He said no
Mhm.
promise. He said no promises, but that'd be really neat. That'd be handy.
Yeah, let's see. Let's see where that comes out. That would be amazing.
And chain cache, for those not aware, chain cache is that thing that Kushti wrote about quite a while ago, where it's essentially these paper bond equivalents that could be transferred in value and build value as people transferred them around each other and sold them and traded them.
Yeah, it's what's called spender signed currency. Okay, and so basically, what that is whenever someone signs it, they're adding a certain collateral, so to speak, that then creates a collateral chain. In my opinion, it's really fascinating because if you look at the derivatives market, which is like the murkiest part of our financial system globally, there's somewhere in the range of like a quadrillion dollars of derivatives floating around, especially if you take in over the counter derivatives. And, on one hand, all they are is a chain of risk, right? It's a chain of collateral and risk, right? But, they're murky enough that, in terms of like the market as a whole, nobody really has any full idea, what the scope and actual net risk
Right, because
is.
you could bundle something together with some pretty shitty collateral in there, and
Yeah,
that'll
yeah, yeah. You
really
can,
weaken the whole chain there.
yeah, yeah. So, when you add toxic collateral, create unknowns, right? And, when you create unknowns on top of unknowns on top of unknowns, it's really hard to not create systemic risk.
Yeah.
And, I guess like in the US, you could say the chain that got really screwed up was, mortgage-backed securities.
Yeah.
It's fancy derivative that all it is it's a chain of risk and collateral, right? And so like off chain, these things get so complicated that there's no way to really audit them or have any, like as a whole anyway. I'm sure you have, quality derivatives out there that are pretty well watched and monitored. But when you get into the over the counter space, hard to say.
Yeah, but on-chain's fantastic, right? You go to a dashboard, put it in,
Yeah.
and you see everything that's backing it, all the collateral and its current pricing and its current value and charts on each individual. I mean, that's amazing concept there. For
Yeah,
anybody.
so on one hand, you can look at what currently exists, which is murky at best. And it's like, okay, well, what if we could put this on chain? And then, what if on a community level you could create a type of note or um, derivative chain of value where you say, okay, well, I'll back this with that. And then somebody says, well, I'll back this with that. Then you can actually independently look and audit and creates a really unique way of potentially moving value. And, the assumption there is then as the actual signature set grows, somewhere along the chain, there's enough value to represent the value of the note.
Yeah. Really cool.
It's kind of like derivative money. It's really high level idea. I love it. To be honest, I think it's a lot. It's just really interesting and potentially disruptive.
Yeah, but I mean, in real life, those derivative markets, sometimes the attractiveness is that they are shady, right? And gray sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes. I guess it depends. Sometimes people will say, hey, this is, mispriced based on the value, or
Yeah.
sometimes people will say, hey, I'm gonna, bundle a package of shit and put a bow tie on it, and
Yep.
now it's this rated, right? So let's see.
Exactly. All right, we got Morphic up next. Their progress, Sigma, PR with reduction in signing of fleet transactions merged. Um, and then the last PR towards Sigma version 5.0.11 is waiting for review by Kushti. Once approved, we'll do the release. Created first PR with better modularization of Sigma. Started moving data serializers into separate module to have compact Sigma core module. Next up, finish moving data serializers to Sigma core module, and he's got all his GitHubs up there. So is this similar to Morphic's working on as far as Fleet goes, interacting with Nemo's Fleet SDK, or Fleet
Yeah. Fleet SDK is downstream, right? So, Morphic's kind of working on the Sigma state interpreter. And then he's also trying to create like parallel environments to where you can essentially do the same thing with multiple languages. And then now, he's actually trying to keep them in parallel as he's.
Oh God. Okay.
Yeah. He's doing some serious work on Sigma, which is actually really amazing to look at Fleet, because as Fleet gets built in, we get this idea where you move development more to the front end and the back end kind of disappears, right? And suddenly, if you can do that effectively, have the right documentation, the barrier of entry gets way lower. And you can create a lot of complex transactions without needing to really dive into the back end, which is cool. It looks like next we have Nemo. So with Nautilus, Ledger added check address on the device function, started refactoring process towards extension manifest v3, which is required by Google. So Google, I know, put some new requirements that Nemo's going to spend a month or two catching up with the continued support in the Play Store. Researching the best path to reuse the current code base for a mobile build. So it'll be cool to see if we can get Nautilus on mobile. Looks like with Ergomatic, finalizing the monitoring component. Once this is done, it's pretty much at the MVP stage. Those of you that don't know, that's an off-chain bot framework. And we've had some research going on from Nemo where trying to compress QR codes, right? So, the idea is if we can compress QR codes small enough, it will be accepted and supported by the majority of transactions, assuming there's not too much bloat in terms of the inputs outputs, and you can actually allow ErgoPay to work without a specific backend for the majority of cases, which takes ErgoPay and basically removes the backend, which is pretty damn cool to see. Depending on how bloated people's wallets get, how much is there. I guess there is some potential that the compression is going to still not make it fit within the QR code, and then you'd need a backend. But some really cool.
So that's to just to clear that up for people from my understanding. If you have 10 Erg in your wallet and an NFT, when you go to send it, you have to make sure that if they're in the same box, you have to make sure that you're only spending 5 of the Erg, the other 5 Erg and the NFT have to come back to you. So that's built into the transaction. So they're saying that if you have many NFTs, many boxes, and you're trying to output this, you can't fit all that text into a QR code, essentially, is what you're saying they're doing here.
Yeah, the transaction.
That's really cool.
Side too big.
So essentially, ErgoPay in the future may look like you go to Spectrum, you initiate a swap, it pops up the QR code, you scan it, boom, it pushes it through, you send it, and Spectrum's just looking for that that TX from your wallet to look for it on its own. Their machine's doing that, and then it does it. So there's no back end relay system that like ErgoPay is doing. Because Satirgo just implemented Ergo Pay, and in the
Mhm.
beta, it's literally in the beta version. It's this executable that's sitting and running all the time in your back end when that happens.
That's pretty cool. I love seeing
Yeah,
that in Ergo.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
so this can give us, the idea here is to say, okay, well, what if we could take Ergo Pay and we could fit it into a light wallet, and basically remove the back end. That'd be pretty cool. Now, it does look like 95% of the time it'll probably be successful, and someone will have a bad roll, and will be too big. Let's see.
Well, I mean,
But then there's the question of is there a way that you could potentially do that in I don't know, two transactions and kind of make it simpler. Hard to say.
yeah, because it should know when it's building the QR code if it's too big or not right there, and it
Yeah,
can
it can spin an
do its thing.
airbag, and then maybe there's a way to work around it. It's an interesting question and path forward.
Very cool. We got Liquid Phase next, who's the THC project. Mostly continuing UI front end work, which is most of the remaining work now. User dashboards, taking pages, release metrics, sales, and social campaign stats. Minting the DDM, Distinct Digital Master workflow flushed out further for further modularity and media publication contract use cases. DDM is their own trademark for an NFT, which is utilized in utility format through a media publication process. Upgrade the latest version of Fleet SDK and refactored the minting function to work with the newly included cryptographic libraries included with it. Got fairly far on a contract compilation front end function in TypeScript to initiate and communicate with a specific smart contracts. For fun and to switch my brain to other areas, I began learning Rust. Encoded a very simple GUI based on audio player application where a user can select one or several audio files and play them in a playlist. I do plan on expanding the audio player to act as a desktop app for and remote for THC in some way. And because my favorite audio player software is called Rune, I'm going to take a leaflet out of Comet's playbook and call my audio player soon. If none of you guys have, if you guys aren't familiar with Liquid, just go into join his THC Telegram channel, or I think it's linked on the Ergo Discord as well. He's dude's a machine. I don't get how this guy outputs so much. It's absolutely crazy. We had a,
Yeah,
a
it is.
late night chat the other night. And he was talking to me about the DDM, the Distinct Digital Master, and how, the options that he wants to downsample from there, either a WAV file or a 320 MP3, and how they were going to distribute those and work with that. But the really cool thing about terahertz too is, I was thinking about, I said to him, I was like, in the 90s, what's it in the 90s? Yeah, late 90s, late 90s, you go to college and there's a network jack in your wall and you plug your 286 in or 486, whatever those old Intel original versions of machines were. Plug it in, you'd click on network neighborhood, and everybody had their music, games, everything shared
Mhm.
right there. And you had Winamp, and you just pointed to one of your neighbor's folders, and you could play all their music that was there, kind of their playlist, but it was their folder. So the idea here too in the future that you could do with THC is everything's on the chain, and the chain versions of this music is going to be a lower quality MP3, and it's there for everybody to hear, of course.
Mhm.
So I could punch your wallet into a player, Joe, and I could
Mhm.
see what Joe is interested in and listen to all of Joe's music. Or I could
Mhm.
punch Liquid's wallet into my player and listen to all the music that way through IPFS, through the chain. All decentralized as far as I go, which is, I mean, this whole project, just like his idea for it, is just mind blowing. And if you're ever in music, I do music. I published an album. I won't say the name of it or anything like that. So I've been through that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And just seeing that the kind of control you can have with THC and the spirit of having your music out there, and you being as close as you can with the distinct digital masters as well. It's just
No, I
absolutely
get
amazing.
it. I get it. It's like next we got Pragmatic Seam. Finished the REST API for the U Explorer and past PRs. State of the database is valid. I maintain UTXO state, so any our corruption would reveal itself during indexing. I found a few invalid SQL joins, and such, so still fixing it. So still work in progress with the U Explorer. Nice to see that dependency start to decentralize.
Let's see. We got a little scroll here. Is the next one greasy?
I think the next one is Greasy.
Oh, he's got a long one. That's pretty greasy, Joe. All right, he says we're back, baby. After a great response from the first mission, they started the process for number 2, the Greasy Royale. It'll continue their main mission to raise funds for, Ergo adoption. They already have an objective in place for the funds raised from Greasy Royale. So in the last couple of weeks, they've made the paper, they made the artwork in discussion and progress, along with possible project partnership and cross ecosystem operability. Whew, interesting. That might be a hint of kind of what the next mission is. Side note, Louis and Julius work together and add the entire Ergo fans collection to the tipper bot. Oh, that's right. So you can now tip. That was mentioned above in Louis' post. There's 3 more legendary sets waiting for homes. They go to anybody that achieves full collection. Let's see. Next step, continue the peer-to review on Greasy Royale paper. Update the web page, review the edition sponsorship opportunities, establish NFT allocations, top secret functionality, release a paper to the community, and they want to host an AMA regarding the Royale participation requirements. And then he's got some stats down here that I won't read through, but you should be able to see them on screen. A ton of money raised for the Ergo adoption initiatives. They did that 1,400 Erg right to the Bitpanda raffle right at the end there, which was fantastic. And I don't want to look at that HODL Erg burn number. It hurts my heart because probably a third of it was my HODL Erg. It was definitely fun burning it and testing the chain at that point. Were you around when we were crashing? We're not crashing, flooding the mempool.
Yeah, I saw a couple. It's like, hold on, it's coming in.
Hold on to your butts. Yeah, that was the fun part. The Bitpanda raffle and the GreasyCEX mission going on at the same time and the burning the HODL erg. It felt like a little bit like the Super Bowl, just kind of like sitting back, watching it, participating in it, seeing stuff happen, and leading up to it. Then the excitement for the raffle funding at the end. That was a great moment in Ergo. I think it was a lot of fun.
Oh, it was a good time, man. It cleared at the end. That was the cool part with extra.
Yep.
All right, so this probably should be its own little video, the whole deal that Cushy's dropping here with the hackathon.
Yeah.
Not sure why it ended up in the dev chat, but we should definitely make sure that we start echoing that.
Yep.
Looks like MG is at the end. Looks like with Zengate working on the front end mobile app improvements, added various transaction support to the back end. With Phoenix, the Holdcoin off-chain bot is a work in progress. So let's actually dig in. Now that the update's done, let's dig into the hackathon. So he says, as we approach the final quarter of 2023, the stage is set for the deployment of several industry-disrupting technologies on Ergo. Rosen Bridge's launch is imminent, and it will enable cross-chain native asset swaps with the Cardano network, with plans to bridge to multiple blockchains. The Paideia team is only several weeks away from releasing the public beta of their DAO software suite. Spectrum Finance has successfully expanded their DEX on Cardano with a roadmap to enable cross-chain swaps between the 2 blockchains. Additionally, Quax has officially launched a lending app. Community developer Captain Nemo has compiled an SDK, which is the software development kit, for new developers looking to build on Ergo. And there are many exciting projects coming to the community, including an IDO of Palmyra DEX. The ecosystem is thriving with new and exciting projects. And as the bear market continues, the surge of developer activity gives a sense that the Ergo platform is just getting started. As the products come online, now is the time for developers and entrepreneurs to consider the future integration of blockchain with mainstream industries. With emerging blockchain and AI technologies, the future of how we interact online and deploy the Internet of Things will look very different in the future. Looking towards this future, the Ergo Foundation is excited to announce Ergohack VII, Future of Finance and the Path to Adoption. Interesting applicants are encouraged to design and build products with the potential to revolutionize the finance industry, including payments, investing, lending, and more. Immediately following Ergohack VII, the Ergo Foundation will also hold an ErgoSummit complementing the theme of this hackathon. So it's pretty exciting. I always love Ergo hacks. That's like one of my favorite things in the Ergo ecosystem. See neat ideas born. I'm excited. Let's see if Alex comes with a project this time. I'm gonna try not to get last place.
Yeah, it's always fun, especially I love that Mark Glasgow puts everything in Discord, so you can literally jump on Discord and be involved in whatever, that I'm sure that's a public voice of their project, but it's nice to be able to go in there and ask questions and say, what exactly are you doing here? Or what is this? Or can I help beta test this with you? Can I jump in and play with this with you, kind of thing? It's amazing that you can be involved with that and everything's so in the open.
Yeah. So I'm excited for the next Ergo hack. Let's see who signs up, who attends.
What's the do we know the awards yet?
I am not 100% sure, because the last time we had an Ergo hack, there were not only the like core rewards, which in this case I think is going to be 18,000 SIG USD,
Wow.
but we also had projects come along, and then we do have these tools like raffle, and who knows, maybe one of these days we'll even have like a GreasyCEX hackathon or something where they get.
Don't give him any ideas, Joe. He's already working on Greasy Mission #3. He doesn't need any distractions.
I'm sorry. But I love seeing that community involvement, because at the end of the day, a lot of community projects, community developers are going to be playing around here, and creating that group incentive and pushing the ecosystem forward as a whole benefits everybody. So
yeah, I agree.
Watch the space and see what ideas come.
Yeah, I think CW did a little community fundraising in the last hackathon as well on Twitter, and got the community to vote in on some of their favorites. I'm going to put in a vote to the Sigmanauts as well to see if we can put some of our treasury funds towards a community gathering of that, or we'll, there's also a pretty big fundraiser on Ergo Raffle by somebody that put it up for do a similar kind of thing, getting the community involved and funding that. So we'll see which way those go. But yeah, lots of opportunity to get the community involved. And I think as an Ergo community as well, as those members, you guys can go out too when these Ergo hack announcements are coming out. It's $18,000. That's a lot. And if there are programs out there that don't know about this, let them be known. Let them know that, hey, we've got Ergohack coming out. You don't know, how to program directly on Ergo. It's okay. We've got Fleet SDK. We've got, even MGPy for ErgPy, that simple tool to interact with the blockchain. You got those kind of things that really make it easy. So if you know a bit of front end and how to configure it to work with the back end, then you're pretty good. And then there's also like a needs a team member on the Discord as well, so people can come in with half a team and try to find some people to jump in with them.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to see what ideas come. There's always that's always the most exciting thing for me. Anyway, has been for a long time. Watching community drop some neat ideas, and so oftentimes you give it time and it actually takes form, and you can look at terahertz or spectrum or a lot of different projects, parts, or the initial kind of seed of the idea that grew into something started at Ergo hack. So for me, it's one of my favorite things to do.
For sure. Great. Is that it, Joe?
That's it. Finished.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for watching. I hope you enjoyed the budget CW, or the CW from Wish. Thanks for letting me join, Joe. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for not making me do this solo. I'm grateful.
Have a good night, everybody.